Imagine discovering that someone has influenced many of your decisions without ever giving a single command, without raising their voice, without making threats, without using force, only through words, looks, silence, and subtle actions that are almost impossible to notice. Manipulation rarely begins in an obvious way. It is usually subtle, almost invisible, and that's exactly why it can continue for months, or even years, without us ever realizing it. But there's an important question. How can you recognize a manipulative person? Are some people simply born that way? Or are all of us capable of manipulating others under certain circumstances? Psychologists spent decades investigating these questions, and what they discovered was surprising. First of all, there's an important distinction. Influencing other people is a natural part of human interaction. Parents influence their children. Teachers influence their students. Friends influence friends. At some point, all of us try to persuade someone. But manipulation is different. With manipulation, information is often distorted, intentions remain hidden, and the other person makes decisions without realizing they're being guided. While persuasion depends on transparency, manipulation depends on the absence of it. That's what makes manipulation so difficult to recognize. There's a fascinating reason for that. The human brain evolved to trust. For most of our history, survival depended on cooperation, sharing food, caring for children, hunting together, building alliances. Trusting other people greatly increased our chances of staying alive. Because of that, in most situations, our brains naturally assume that others are telling the truth. This tendency helps us build relationships, but it also creates a vulnerability, because some people learn to exploit that very trust. Interestingly, manipulative people rarely begin by being aggressive. Most of the time, they're pleasant, attentive, charismatic. They know how to listen. They know how to give compliments. They know how to make others feel special. That's because earning someone's trust is far more effective than demanding obedience. Manipulation rarely starts with conflict. It usually begins with connection. And because it looks like an ordinary relationship, it almost never raises suspicion. There's one sign that appears surprisingly often in manipulative relationships. After a few conversations, you begin to question your own perception. You wonder if you overreacted, if you misunderstood what happened, if you're simply being too sensitive. Little by little, your confidence in your own judgment begins to fade, while your confidence in the other person's version of events keeps growing. This process doesn't always happen consciously, but it can profoundly change the way we perceive reality. When we stop consistently trusting our own perception, we become increasingly dependent on someone else's interpretation. There's another tool that is frequently used in manipulation: guilt. It often appears in very subtle ways. After everything I've done for you, I expected more from you. You've changed. You're being selfish. These statements aren't always manipulative, but when they're used repeatedly to control another person's decisions, they stop being simple comments and become a form of emotional pressure. Guilt has a powerful influence on human behavior because we are a deeply social species. Being accepted by the group has always been essential to our survival, and our brains still respond intensely to the possibility of rejection or disapproval. So far, it may seem that manipulative people always rely on the same tactics, but psychology has uncovered something even more interesting. Certain patterns appear again and again. Some are extremely subtle, others can remain hidden for a very long time, and many of them go completely unnoticed, precisely because they look like ordinary everyday behavior. There's one manipulation tactic that has captured psychologists' attention for decades. It happens when someone repeatedly tries to make another person doubt their own perception. It rarely happens all at once. It begins gradually. You misunderstood. That never happened. You're overreacting. You're remembering it differently. On their own, any of these statements could be part of an ordinary conversation, but when they appear over and over again, always calling the other person's perception into question, they can slowly erode confidence in their own memories, little by little. The question changes from, what really happened, to, can I even trust myself? There's another pattern that psychology knows well, the alternation between closeness and distance. At certain moments, the person is incredibly affectionate, attentive, interested. Then suddenly, they pull away, become distant, cold, or indifferent. This back and forth can create intense anticipation. Without realizing it, the brain begins waiting for the next moment of approval. It's precisely this unpredictability that can make the emotional bond feel so powerful in certain relationships. Not because the affection is greater, but because we never know exactly when it will return. There's another warning sign worth paying attention to. Little by little, some manipulative relationships begin to reduce a person's contact with other sources of support. This doesn't always happen through direct prohibition. It may begin with comments that sound completely harmless. Your friends don't really care about you. Your family never understands you. I'm the only one who truly cares about you. When these messages are repeated over time, a person's social circle gradually becomes smaller, and the fewer different perspectives we hear, the harder it becomes to recognize that something is wrong. Isolation doesn't just increase dependence, it also reduces our opportunities to question what we're experiencing. There's something particularly deceptive about manipulation. It rarely presents itself as control. More often, it disguises itself as care. I'm only asking because I care about you. I'm doing this for your own good. I just want to protect you. Of course, caring is an essential part of every healthy relationship. The problem begins when that concern starts limiting another person's choices, controlling their decisions, or preventing them from maintaining their independence. Healthy relationships offer support. They don't replace personal freedom. Perhaps there's an even more important question. If these warning signs exist, why do so many people take so long to recognize them? Because we almost never experience an entire relationship all at once. We live through it one conversation at a time, one decision, one comment, one small moment of doubt, taken individually. Each situation seems insignificant, but when we step back and look at them together, a pattern may begin to emerge. Our brains naturally interpret stories, and they don't always recognize when countless small experiences are gradually becoming one much larger narrative. Fortunately, understanding these mechanisms makes it much harder to be manipulated by them. Asking questions, seeking different perspectives, staying connected with people you trust, taking time to reflect before making important decisions. These habits help reduce the influence of emotional pressure. Likewise, learning to set healthy boundaries strengthens our independence. Healthy relationships welcome questions, accept differences, and respect personal choices. When a relationship constantly requires us to abandon our own perception, it may be time to take a closer look at what's really happening. All of us influence other people, and all of us are influenced by them. That's simply part of living in society. But there's an important difference between relationships built on trust and relationships built on control. Manipulation rarely begins with dramatic lies. It usually starts with small behaviors, repeated over time. The better we understand how the human mind works, the easier it becomes to recognize these patterns. Not so we become suspicious of everyone, nor so we mistake every disagreement for manipulation, but to protect something that no healthy relationship should ever take away from us: our ability to think, to choose, and to trust our own perception. Perhaps the greatest protection against manipulation isn't simply learning to recognize manipulative people. Perhaps it's developing a mind that asks questions, that listens to different perspectives, and refuses to surrender its own judgment, because healthy relationships don't need to control. They allow both people to grow with respect, freedom, and trust.